You have 72 hours to get every single person, every piece of furniture, and every trace of your existence out of my house. After that, I stop being your brother and start being your landlord's worst nightmare. That's what I said to my older brother Marcus while standing on the porch of my own home, the home I'd bought, paid for, and maintained for 4 years, while he blocked the doorway like he had every right to be there. His wife Danielle stood behind him with her arms crossed, and their 3 kids were watching cartoons on my television in my living room. And Marcus looked me dead in the face and said, "You weren't even using it, Ryan. We needed a place. You should be grateful someone was watching over it." Grateful. He actually used that word, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story, and I promise you every word of it is true, is one of those situations where you think it can't possibly get worse, and then it does, and then it does again, and then you find yourself standing in a courtroom wondering how your own blood could betray you this completely. My name is Ryan Mercer. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I've been active duty since I was 19, which means I've spent more of my adult life sleeping on cots and shipping containers than in any bed I've ever owned. I make about $58,000 a year base pay with my housing allowance, which isn't spectacular, but when you're deployed 9 months out of every 18 and you've got no wife, no kids, and no expensive habits, that money stacks up. I'm not rich. I've never been rich. But I'm careful. I budget every dollar. I drive a 2019 Tacoma that I bought used with cash. I don't carry credit card debt. And in 2021, when I was 26, I bought a 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet suburb outside of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, for $247,000. Put $52,000 down. Mortgage payment was $1,180 a month. I set up auto pay, kept the utilities on a budget plan, and hired a property management company to check on the place once a month while I was gone. That house was the first thing I ever truly owned, and I was proud of it in a way that's hard to explain to people who've always had a place to call home. See, Marcus and I didn't exactly grow up with stability. Our dad left when I was 6 and Marcus was 9. Just gone one morning. No note, no forwarding address, no child support. Our mum, Linda, did her absolute best, and I will never say a bad word about that woman. But she worked 2 jobs, and we still moved 4 times before I finished middle school. We shared bedrooms, we ate a lot of rice and beans, and we wore clothes from church donation bins. When I was 14, Mum got sick. Lupus. It hit hard and fast, and within 2 years she was on disability. Marcus was 17 and I was 14, and suddenly we were the ones taking care of her. I mowed lawns after school. Marcus worked at a gas station. We kept the lights on, barely. Mum passed when I was 18. Pancreatic cancer that nobody caught in time because she'd been so focused on managing the lupus that she kept ignoring the stomach pain. I held her hand in that hospital room and I promised her I'd make something of myself. 3 weeks after the funeral, I walked into a recruiting office and signed my life over to the United States Army. I didn't have a college fund. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have anyone willing to co-sign a student loan. The Army was my ticket out, and I took it. Marcus went a different direction. And look, I love my brother. Or I loved who I thought he was. But the truth is, Marcus has always had a complicated relationship with effort. He's smart. Genuinely smart. He can talk his way into any room, charm any person, make you feel like you're the most important person in the world for exactly as long as he needs something from you. But he's never held a job for more than 14 months. He's been a car salesman, a restaurant manager, a day trader who lost $11,000 in 6 weeks, a real estate agent who never closed a single deal, and most recently, a social media consultant, which, as far as I could tell, meant he posted motivational quotes on Instagram and called it a business. He married Danielle in 2019. She was 23 at the time, worked part-time at a nail salon, and within the first year of marriage, they had their first kid. Then another. Then another. 3 kids in 4 years, a combined household income that never topped $38,000, and a lifestyle that somehow always required more. I don't say this to be cruel, I say it because you need to understand the dynamic. Marcus was the older brother who always had a plan, always had an angle, and always needed just a little help to get over the hump. And I was the younger brother who kept my head down, saved my money, and never asked anyone for anything. For years, that worked fine. Marcus would call me every few months. We'd catch up. He'd hint that things were tight, and I'd send him $500 or $1,000 because he was my brother, and that's what you do. Over the course of about 6 years, I estimate I sent Marcus somewhere in the neighborhood of $14,000. I never asked for a dime of it back. I never even kept track until all of this happened, and I went back through my bank statements. Now, in March of 2024, I got orders for a 9-month deployment. I won't get into specifics about where, but it was overseas, and communications were limited. Before I left, I did what I always did. I made sure the house was squared away. I had the property management company do a full inspection. I drained the water heater, set the thermostat to 60 degrees, put timers on a few lights, stopped the mail, and made sure my autopay was current on every bill. I also did something I'd been thinking about for a while. I called Marcus. "Hey, I'm deploying again," I told him. 9 months. I just wanted to let you know. If you need anything, you can reach me through my email, but it might take me a few days to respond. And Marcus said something that, at the time, I thought was just his usual charm. He said, "Don't worry about a thing, little bro. I'll keep an eye on everything. You just focus on coming home safe." I thanked him. I actually thanked him. I told him I appreciated it and that it meant a lot knowing someone was looking out for things while I was gone. I didn't give him a key. I didn't give him permission to enter the house. I didn't add him to any utilities. I simply told him I was leaving, and he offered to keep an eye on things. That was the extent of it. Those were the exact words exchanged. Remember that, because it becomes important later. I deployed on April 3rd, 2024. For the first 2 months, everything was normal. My property management company sent their monthly reports. House looked fine, no issues, lawn service was handling the yard. Then in June, I got an email from the management company that made my blood pressure spike. It read, and I'm paraphrasing here, "Mr. Mercer, during our scheduled inspection, we found the property occupied. A man identifying himself as your brother stated that he has permission to live in the residence. Please advise." I stared at that email for a long time. I read it 3 times. Then I emailed Marcus. "Hey, the property management company says someone is living in my house. What's going on?" It took him 4 days to respond. 4 days. And when he did, the email was pure Marcus, casual, deflective, and wrapped in just enough guilt to make you feel bad for asking. "Hey bro, yeah, so things got really tight with our landlord, and we had to move quick. I remembered you said to keep an eye on the place, so I figured you wouldn't mind if we stayed there temporarily until we got back on our feet. Don't worry, we're taking great care of it. Focus on your mission. We'll talk when you get back." Temporarily, got back on their feet. Don't worry. Every single one of those phrases was a lie, and deep down I think I knew it even then. But I was deployed. I was thousands of miles away. I was in a situation where my focus needed to be on my job and my team, not on a domestic dispute back in Kentucky. So I made what I thought was the pragmatic choice. I emailed him back and said, "Marcus, this isn't okay. I didn't give you permission to move in. I need you to start looking for a place and be out by the time I get back in December. I'm serious." He didn't respond to that one. I contacted the property management company and told them the situation. They informed me that without being physically present, and with the occupant claiming familial permission, the situation was essentially a civil matter that I'd need to handle through the courts or in person. They offered to send a formal notice, and I said yes, do it. They sent a letter to Marcus informing him that he was not an authorized occupant and requesting that he vacate. According to their records, the letter was received and signed for by Danielle on July 14th. Nothing happened. Nobody moved. Over the next 3 months, I got bits and pieces of information that made me progressively more furious. The property management company reported that the locks had been changed. My locks, on my doors. They couldn't complete their monthly inspections anymore because they didn't have the new keys. A neighbor I'd exchanged numbers with before deployment, a retired teacher named Gloria, absolute saint of a woman, started texting me updates. Marcus and Danielle had painted the master bedroom. They'd pulled up the carpet in the living room and put down cheap laminate. They'd set up a trampoline in the backyard. Their kids were enrolled in the local school. Danielle had told Gloria at a neighborhood barbecue that they'd bought the house from Ryan for a great deal. Bought it, from me. Let that sink in for a moment. My brother's wife was telling my neighbors that they had purchased my home. The home I was still making mortgage payments on. The home that was in my name and my name only. The home I had a deed for, locked in a safe deposit box at a bank 15 minutes from Fort Campbell. The audacity was so staggering that when Gloria told me, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process any other response. I called my bank and checked the mortgage account. Still current because my auto pay was still running. I was literally paying the mortgage on a house my brother had stolen. I checked the utility accounts. The electric bill had tripled. The water bill had doubled. The gas bill was through the roof. They were running my house like it was a hotel, and I was footing every single bill. That's when I stopped being angry and started being strategic. I had 4 months left on my deployment. I used every spare minute I had to prepare. I contacted a real estate attorney in Clarksville, Tennessee, a guy named Daniel Whitfield who came recommended by a JAG officer I trusted. I retained him with a $3,500 deposit and explained the entire situation. He pulled the deed, confirmed I was the sole owner, and began preparing the legal groundwork for an unlawful detainer action. In Kentucky, the eviction process for someone who was never a tenant and never had a lease is different from a standard landlord-tenant eviction. Daniel explained that Marcus was legally what's called a licensee at sufferance, someone whose permission to be on the property had been explicitly revoked. That distinction was going to matter a lot. I also contacted my chain of command and explained the situation. Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act, there are certain protections for deployed military members regarding property issues. My first sergeant connected me with a legal assistance office that helped me file a formal complaint. Every communication I had with Marcus, with the property management company, with the neighbors, I saved everything. Every email, every text, every report. I built a file that was, by the time I got home, 47 pages long. I landed back in the States on December 11, 2024. I spent 3 days at Fort Campbell doing reintegration processing, medical screenings, and briefings. On December 14th, a Saturday, I drove to my house. My house. And I used that phrase deliberately because what I pulled up to didn't look like anything I recognized. There was a beat-up minivan in the driveway next to an older Nissan Altima with a cracked windshield. The yard that I'd paid a lawn service to maintain was patchy and overgrown. There were toys scattered across the front porch, and someone had hung a wreath on the door, my door, that said the Mitchell family in gold script. Mitchell. That's Danielle's maiden name. They'd hung a decoration with her maiden name on my front door. I sat in my truck for about 15 minutes. I took deep breaths. I called Daniel Whitfield and told him I was there. He said, "Remember what we discussed. Stay calm. State your position clearly. Do not enter the house forcefully. Do not threaten them. And if they refuse to leave, we proceed with the legal action on Monday." I walked up to the porch and knocked on my own door. It took about 45 seconds for Marcus to answer. He opened the door, and I watched his face go through 4 distinct emotions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, recognition, panic, and then that infuriating mask of casual confidence that he's worn his entire life. "Ryan, hey man, you're back. When did you get in? Come in, come in." He actually stepped aside and gestured for me to enter my own house, like he was welcoming me as a guest. In my own home. I stayed on the porch. "Marcus, we need to talk." Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I know you're probably wondering about the living situation. I'm not wondering, Marcus. I know exactly what the situation is. You moved your family into my house without permission. You changed the locks. Your wife told the neighbors you bought the place. You ignored every communication asking you to leave. The confidence flickered, just for a second. Then he leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. A posture I recognized from every argument we'd ever had. The one that says, "I'm the older brother, and I'll handle this." Okay, look, I know it looks bad, but you have to understand. Our landlord raised the rent by $400, and we had 30 days to find a place. The kids were starting school. Danielle was pregnant with the fourth. Fourth? Yeah, she's due in March. But listen, the point is, we were desperate. And you had this whole house sitting empty. 3 bedrooms. Nobody using them. I figured, he's my brother. He'd want us to be safe and warm instead of on the street. So you changed my locks. He shifted his weight. That was Danielle's idea. She didn't feel safe with the old locks. You know how she is. And telling the neighbors you bought the house. She was just, look, people ask questions, and she didn't want them thinking we were squatting or something. You are squatting, Marcus. Don't say that, man. Don't call it that. We're family. That word, family. He used it like a shield, like it was supposed to deflect everything. The deception, the theft, the disrespect, the sheer arrogance of taking someone's home and acting like they should be grateful. I felt something shift inside me right then. Not anger exactly, something colder, something final. Marcus, you have 72 hours to get every single person, every piece of furniture, and every trace of your existence out of my house. After that, I stop being your brother and start being your worst nightmare. Ryan, come on, it's 2 weeks before Christmas. You can't kick us out before Christmas. The kids, you had 9 months to find a place. You had 6 months of explicit warnings. You chose to stay. You chose to change my locks. You chose to lie to my neighbors. Those were your decisions. Now here are the consequences. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. Danielle appeared behind Marcus. She'd been listening the whole time, and she came out with both barrels blazing. You know what, Ryan? You're heartless. You're a single guy with no family, living in a house you don't even use. We have 3 children and 1 on the way, and you're going to throw us on the street 2 weeks before Christmas. What kind of person does that? I looked at her. I kept my voice level. The kind of person who owns this house, Danielle. The kind of person who has been paying the mortgage, the insurance, and apparently your electric bills for the last 9 months while you told everyone you bought it. Would you like me to show you the deed? Because I have it right here. I held up the folder, the one with 47 pages of documentation. The deed, the mortgage statements, the emails, the property management reports, the texts from Gloria, everything. Danielle's face went through something similar to Marcus's, but she landed on fury instead of panic. You're going to regret this, she said. We have rights. You can't just throw people out. We've been living here for months. We have established residency. My attorney disagrees, and he'll be filing paperwork Monday morning. I turned and walked back to my truck. Behind me, I heard Marcus call out, Ryan, Ryan, come on, let's talk about this like adults. And then Danielle's voice, sharper, let him go. He thinks he's tough because he wears a uniform. We'll see how tough he is when I call the news. I drove to Gloria's house. She'd offered to let me stay in her guest room, and I'd taken her up on it. I sat on her floral couch, and she brought me coffee in a mug that said World's Best Grandma, and she said, Honey, I know that was hard, but you did the right thing. I didn't sleep that night. Monday morning, December 16th, Daniel Whitfield filed the unlawful detainer action in Christian County District Court. Because Marcus was never a tenant and never had a lease, the timeline was accelerated compared to a standard eviction. The court date was set for January 8th. In the meantime, Marcus was served with formal legal papers on December 18th. That's when things escalated in ways I never anticipated. First, Marcus started calling, not to negotiate, to rage. At 11:30 p.m. on December 18th, my phone lit up. You're really doing this? You're taking your own brother to court, over a house you don't even live in. Mom would be ashamed of you. She would be disgusted. I let it go to voicemail. He called 4 more times. Each message was angrier than the last. The 5th one was Danielle, and she was screaming about how I was trying to make her kids homeless, and how she was going to make sure everyone knows what kind of monster I was. Then came the social media campaign. On December 20th, Danielle posted a long weeping video on Facebook. I didn't see it directly, but Gloria screenshot the whole thing and sent it to me. In the video, Danielle was sitting on my couch, crying and saying that her heartless brother-in-law was evicting a pregnant woman and 3 children from their home right before Christmas because he was jealous of their family, since he couldn't get a woman to stay with him. The video got over 2,000 shares. People I'd never met were commenting about what a monster I was. Someone started a GoFundMe for Danielle titled, "Help a Pregnant Mom Keep Her Home." Her home. My home. The home I was still paying the mortgage on. I called Daniel. He told me not to engage publicly, not to comment on anything, and to screenshot everything. Every lie she tells publicly is evidence of bad faith, he said. Let them dig their own grave. The next escalation came on December 23rd. I got a call from my bank. Someone had attempted to add themselves as an authorized party on my mortgage account. They'd called the bank, identified themselves as Ryan Mercer's brother and co-owner of the property, and requested access to the account information. The bank's fraud department flagged it immediately because they already had a note on my account about the situation. They asked if I wanted to file a fraud report. I said yes. On December 26th, Marcus showed up at Gloria's house. He didn't knock, he pounded on the door at 8:15 in the morning. Gloria opened it, and he pushed past her into the living room where I was eating breakfast. "You filed a fraud report against me, your own brother. You tried to access my mortgage account, Marcus. I was trying to help. I was going to make a payment. You've never made a payment on that house in your life, because you never asked me to. You had this house sitting empty and you thought wrong. And now you've got a fraud investigation and an eviction case. Do you want to add trespassing to the list? Because you're in Gloria's house without permission right now." Gloria, bless her, was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a spatula like she was considering using it as a weapon. "Marcus, I think you should leave," she said, in that calm, iron-voiced way that only retired teachers can pull off. He left, but not before pointing at me and saying, "This isn't over. You think you've got it all figured out, but you don't know everything." I had no idea what he meant by that. I found out 5 days later. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, I got a call from Daniel Whitfield. His voice was different, tighter, more urgent. "Ryan, I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow. We've got a complication." I was there at 8 a.m. on January 1st. Daniel showed me the paperwork. Marcus had filed a counterclaim. He was arguing that I had verbally agreed to let him live in the house rent-free as a familial arrangement, and that by allowing him to stay for 9 months and continue paying the mortgage, I had created an implied lease. He was also claiming that the improvements he'd made to the property, the painting, the flooring, the landscaping, constituted sweat equity and entitled him to compensation. I looked at Daniel. Can he do that? He can file anything he wants. The question is whether it holds up, and in this case, it won't, because you have documented evidence that you told him to leave within weeks of learning he was there. The implied lease argument falls apart when you can show that permission was never given and was explicitly revoked. But it does mean this goes to a hearing, and it might extend the timeline by a few weeks. What about the improvements? Daniel actually smiled at that. He painted your walls a color you didn't choose and put down flooring without your permission. That's not sweat equity. That's property damage. We can actually counter-claim for restoration costs. It was the first time I'd smiled in weeks. The court date arrived on January 8th. I wore my dress uniform, not to showboat. Daniel suggested it. "The judge is a veteran," he said. "It won't hurt." Marcus showed up in khakis and a button-down that was too tight across the middle, and Danielle wore a dress that made her pregnancy very visible. They had a lawyer, a younger guy who looked about 25 and kept shuffling his papers nervously. The hearing lasted 2 hours and 14 minutes. I'll give you the highlights. Marcus's lawyer argued the implied lease theory. Daniel demolished it in about 6 minutes, presenting the email chain where I explicitly told Marcus to leave, the property management company's formal notice, and the text messages from my deployment where I repeatedly told Marcus the arrangement was temporary and unauthorized. Marcus's lawyer pivoted to the sweat equity argument. Daniel presented the original condition report from the property management company, photos of the house before I deployed, and a contractor's estimate showing that the improvements Marcus had made actually decreased the property value by approximately $200 because the laminate flooring was installed improperly over the original hardwood, and the paint job was, in the contractor's professional opinion, substandard and inconsistent. Then Daniel played his ace. He presented the screenshot of the GoFundMe page where Danielle described the house as her home. He presented the bank's fraud report showing Marcus had tried to access my mortgage account. He presented a text message from Danielle to a friend, obtained through Discovery, where she wrote, and I'll never forget this: "Ryan's too dumb to do anything about it. He's stuck overseas playing soldier. By the time he gets back, we'll have been here long enough that they can't touch us." The judge read that text message out loud. The courtroom went quiet. Marcus wouldn't look at me. Danielle stared at the table. Their lawyer looked like he wished he was anywhere else on earth. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. He ordered Marcus and Danielle to vacate the property within 14 days. He awarded me $6,800 in damages for the unauthorized modifications, $2,400 for excess utility costs, and $3,500 in legal fees. He also referred the mortgage fraud attempt to the county prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges. As we were leaving the courtroom, Marcus grabbed my arm. His eyes were red. "Ryan, please, we don't have anywhere to go. The kids—" "You had 9 months to figure that out, Marcus. You spent that time changing my locks, lying to my neighbors, and trying to steal my mortgage account. I'm done." Mom would never have wanted this. That was the line that almost broke me. Almost. Because he was probably right. Mom would have told me to forgive him. Mom would have said family is everything. But Mom also never had someone steal her house and call her stupid behind her back. Mom never had to read a text message from her sister-in-law saying she was too dumb to fight back. I think Mom, if she could see the full picture, would have understood. "Don't you ever use Mom against me again," I said. "You lost that right when your wife called me dumb for serving my country." I walked away. I didn't look back. The 14-day eviction period was supposed to end on January 22nd. It didn't go smoothly. On January 15th, the property management company did a drive-by and reported that it looked like Marcus was packing. On January 18th, they reported that the minivan was gone, but the Altima was still there. On January 21st, one day before the deadline, Gloria texted me, "They're still here. Lights are on. Kids are playing in the yard." I called Daniel. He filed a motion for enforcement. The sheriff's office was contacted. On January 23rd, a deputy went to the house and informed Marcus and Danielle that they were in violation of a court order and had 24 hours to vacate before they would be forcibly removed. They left on January 24th, but not before one final act of spite. When I entered my house for the first time in 10 months, I stood in the doorway and felt something crack inside my chest. The walls were covered in scuff marks and crayon drawings. The carpet in the hallway was stained with something dark, juice maybe, or coffee. The kitchen had grease stains on the ceiling above the stove. 2 of the 3 bathroom toilets were running constantly. The master bedroom closet door was hanging off one hinge. The backyard was destroyed. The trampoline was still there, but the grass underneath was dead, and there were holes dug in 3 different places that I later learned were from a dog they'd gotten and apparently given away before they left. But the worst part was the garage. I'd left a storage unit in the garage with personal items. Mum's photo albums, my deployment mementos, a shadow box with my first service medals, a small safe with important documents. The storage unit was there, but it had been opened. The safe was gone. The photo albums were water damaged, stacked on the garage floor next to a leaking water heater that Marcus had apparently tried to fix himself. 3 of the 4 albums were ruined. 26 years of family photos, Mom's smile at Christmas, Marcus and me as kids at the lake, my basic training graduation, soaked and stuck together and gone. I sat on the garage floor for a long time. I'm not going to pretend I didn't cry, because I did. I called Daniel and reported the missing safe and the property damage. He filed a supplemental claim. I also filed a police report for the stolen safe, which contained my birth certificate, my passport, thankfully I had my military ID, and about $3,000 in emergency cash. Marcus denied taking the safe. Of course he did. But here's the thing about Marcus. He's smart, but he's not careful. 3 weeks later, a pawn shop in Clarksville contacted the police department because someone had tried to sell a small safe matching the description in my report. The pawn shop had cameras. The person who brought in the safe was Danielle's cousin, a guy named Travis, who crumbled under questioning in approximately 11 minutes and admitted that Marcus had asked him to get rid of it and split whatever cash was inside. Travis had already spent $1,800 of the $3,000. Marcus was charged with theft and conspiracy. Danielle was named as a person of interest because Travis said she knew about it and had suggested the pawn shop. The criminal case is still pending as I write this, but Daniel tells me it's open and shut. Marcus's public defender has already floated a plea deal. Marcus might be looking at up to a year in county. Meanwhile, I spent $18,000 repairing my house. New paint throughout. Hardwood floors restored. New locks, obviously. New water heater. Garage cleaned out and organized. New toilets, new closet doors, deep cleaning that took a professional crew 2 full days. When it was done, the house appraised for $289,000, up from the $247,000 I'd paid, even after everything Marcus did to it. Turns out the neighborhood had appreciated significantly while I was gone. At least something went right. As for the family fallout, and there's always family fallout in these situations, it split right down the middle. My Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, called me and said I should have handled it within the family, and that taking Marcus to court was a betrayal of everything Linda taught you. I told Aunt Patricia that Marcus stole my house, my money, and Mom's photos. And if that wasn't a betrayal of everything Linda taught him, then I didn't know what was. She hung up on me. We haven't spoken since. My cousin Derek, on the other hand, called me and said, "Dude, everyone knows Marcus is like this. You're the first person who actually held him accountable." Derek told me that Marcus had pulled similar stunts with other family members, borrowing money and never repaying it, overstaying his welcome at people's houses, always having a sob story ready. Derek said he'd lent Marcus $5,000 3 years ago and never seen a penny. When I asked why nobody ever said anything, Derek laughed and said, "Because Marcus is charming, and your mum always made excuses for him. Now your mum's gone, and there's nobody left to clean up his messes." Marcus tried to contact me one last time. About 2 months after the eviction, he sent me a long email, 4 paragraphs, that was, depending on how you read it, either a genuine apology or one final manipulation. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been struggling with depression. He said Danielle had been pushing him to take more and more, and he'd been too weak to stop her. He said he missed his brother, and he'd do anything to make things right. I read that email probably 15 times. Part of me wanted to believe it. The part of me that remembers sharing a bunk bed with him when we were kids. The part that remembers him walking me to school on my first day of 3rd grade. The part that remembers him sneaking me his Halloween candy when I was sick. That Marcus, the one I grew up with, the one who was my best friend when we had nothing. That Marcus deserved a second chance. But then I thought about the text message. Ryan's too dumb to do anything about it. I thought about the stolen safe. I thought about Mom's ruined photo albums. I thought about standing on my own porch, knocking on my own door, being told I should be grateful that someone stole my home. And I thought about the GoFundMe and the Facebook video, and Danielle calling me a heartless monster for wanting back what was mine. I didn't respond to the email. I've been back in my house now for about 5 months. I replaced the photos I could, reached out to relatives, collected digital copies, reprinted what was salvageable. I framed a photo of Mom that Gloria found in a neighborhood newsletter from years ago and hung it in the hallway. I got a security camera system installed. I got a proper alarm. I updated my will and my power of attorney. I found a new property management company with better protocols for my next deployment. The house is quiet. Sometimes too quiet. I'll be making dinner and I'll hear the echo of my own footsteps, and I'll think about Marcus's kids, my niece and 2 nephews, and how none of this was their fault. They didn't ask for parents who steal houses. They didn't choose any of this. And there's a part of me that aches for them, even though I know that feeling anything for Marcus's children doesn't mean I have to accept what Marcus did. People ask me if I feel guilty. My buddies in the unit, Gloria, Derek, they all ask some version of that question, and the honest answer is sometimes. Not for what I did, but for what I had to become to do it. I didn't want to be the kind of person who takes his brother to court. I didn't want to be the kind of person who files police reports on family. I wanted to be the kind of person who comes home from deployment, opens a beer, sits on his porch, and calls his brother to catch up. That's the life Marcus took from me. Not just the house, though that was violation enough, but the relationship, the possibility of brotherhood. The idea that there was at least one person in the world who had my back, unconditionally, because we shared the same blood. He burned that down, and then he blamed me for the ashes. Here's what I know for sure. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can forgive someone in your heart and still refuse to let them back into your life. You can miss the person someone used to be while accepting that the person they've become is dangerous to you. And you can lose a brother and still be whole. My house is mine, my life is mine, my peace is mine. And nobody, not Marcus, not Danielle, not Aunt Patricia, not anyone, is ever going to take any of that from me again. That's my line in the sand, and I'm not moving it for anybody.